Okay, hello and welcome to Dev's Journey. And today I'll be talking about my two trips to Dominican Republic and to Mexico. Both of these trips are completely different. And one of the trips I was amongst the people. I was in a resort or a cruise, and the other trip was a resort theme. I actually took a cruise. So in this video, I'll be telling you guys how I utilize my Spanish in both of these places, and if I recommend you to travel to a resort or to a place that's not a resort to practice your Spanish and talk to the locals. Okay, so my first trip I took was in May. I went to the Dominican Republic for 10 days, and I was not on a resort. I was amongst the people, and the place it was touristy, but it wasn't that touristy. There was a lot of Americans there, but the locals didn't really speak English. They spoke English in my hotel, but once I was on the streets, a lot of people didn't speak English. I went to restaurants. The waiters and the waitresses, they didn't speak English. So with that being said, I was forced to communicate with the waiters and the waitresses in Spanish. I would ask them questions. ¿Qué me recomiendas? What do you recommend me for, um, like to eat? Like, what's the best food do you have? And stuff like that. Another thing I asked was, or usted acepta tarjeta de crédito? So, do you accept credit cards? And this is very important. I think both of those phrases are very, very important if you want to learn Spanish and if you travel to um, a city that is not really a big tourist destination where everybody speaks English. So I think you should know those basic phrases for a restaurant at least. Because when I went to the Dominican Republic, I learned that a lot of these restaurants didn't accept credit cards. I had Visa, American Express, MasterCard, and they didn't accept nothing for the most part. Like, I went to a lot of restaurants in 10 days. So I would say about 90% only accepted pesos. So, with that being said, being in the Dominican Republic for 10 days and not a big tourist attraction, I was forced to speak Spanish. And if you are learning Spanish, I recommend this highly. I highly, highly recommend you travel to a different country that isn't a resort, that isn't like a, or isn't a resort, so you can speak your Spanish. Um, so another scenario, my brother and I we were trying to go to this one place, and when I arrived in the Dominican Republic, the first day I had no service, and I didn't want to pay for service, and I couldn't use my translator. So at this point in my Spanish journey, I think I was at month seven. So I knew a lot of Spanish at this point. So I asked this lady, this worker, we went to this store, and I asked her, I'm um, like, can you call me a taxi? But I didn't say that in English because she didn't speak no English. She only spoke Spanish. So she called the taxi for us, and I told the taxi driver, where I want to go because he didn't speak English. So I recommend you to go to a place like that if you don't. I mean, if you want to learn Spanish, you don't want to speak English all the time. So my other trip was recently. I went to Mexico. I went to Mexico for um, it was a 5 day cruise. I went on a cruise, so we had left from Texas. Um, we spent like 2 days, more or less, on the water. Then we finally got to Costa Maya. Costa Maya is beautiful. It's very, very beautiful, and since we were on a cruise, we're with like 5,000 other Americans, and nobody speaks Spanish, and everybody speaks English. So that being said, when we finally arrived to Costa Maya on the technically third day, because we left on Saturday. We arrived at Costa Maya at 12 o'clock at noon. on Monday. So basically 2 days on the water. So, and also we only had 6 hours. So my family and I, we did the excursion. We went to the pyramids, and I posted it on my YouTube short. So if you want to see that, it's there. Um, but we saw the pyramids, and it was nice. You know, it was very very nice. And if you're learning Spanish, I recommend you to go on a cruise or to go on a American resort, American themed resort where everybody in the resort speaks English, and you're not really forced to use your Spanish. Um, I don't recommend it. I really don't, because when I was on the bus going to the pyramid, it was about an hour. So our schedule was 4 hours in total. It was an hour bus trip there and an hour bus trip back. So we only had basically 2 hours, like, seeing the pyramids, the Mayan pyramids and stuff like that. So the tour guide, he spoke perfect English. Like, he literally sounded American. He had no accent or nothing at all. So, and a lot of Mexicans on this excursion spoke perfect English. So I couldn't really use my Spanish because I wasn't really forced to use my Spanish, if that makes sense. So, and another thing is, like, when I was talking to them in Spanish, they would respond to me in English. So it was like very, very frustrating because, like, right now I want to use what I learned, um, and talk to natives. I want to talk to natives in Spanish, and I want to, make connections, make friendships, and things of that nature. So, um, if you're learning Spanish, I don't recommend you thinking like, oh yeah, I'm going to use my Spanish all the time. I'm on this cruise, on this resort, because you're not, because they're going to speak to you in English. So, with that being said, I did have conversations with people in Spanish, and it was nice. I was talking to this one dude in a restaurant, and he was a very very nice, very awesome guy. And he was asking me questions. I was responding to him. He was like, "Wow, you speak really good Spanish," and I was like, "Thank you," and stuff like that. And it's nice. It's nice to actually use the Spanish at those places because everybody speaks English. So if you want to separate yourself, if you want to look more unique, you should use Spanish. Use Spanish to talk to the natives. They love that. They love that a lot because everybody is American and everybody speaks English and nobody wants to speak Spanish. So Cozumel. So Tuesday we ride Cozumel, and again I couldn't really use my Spanish because everybody spoke English. But my brother and I, we went to this restaurant in the morning, and I was asking questions like, "Are you open? Can you serve food?" And I was actually asking these questions in Spanish, and she was like, "Yeah, like, what do you want? Do you want guacamole and chips, or guacamole and a tortilla, I think it was, and some other types of food. I can't remember." But I was like, I want chips and guacamole, and I was talking to my waitress in Spanish, and she loved that I was talking to her in Spanish. She was like, "Wow, like, are you Brazilian?" I was like, "No, I'm American." But she loved that I spoke Spanish. She was like, "You speak very good Spanish," and I was like, "Thank you." And the guy who was preparing my guacamole, my brother and I asked him. I was like, "What do you recommend, like, food? Because I want to come back later. I want to return later." And he was like, "I really recommend a fish taco." So I returned later, and I was ordering in Spanish and things of that nature, and they loved it. And then so after our first excursion, my mom and I, we went to a beach, and the beach unfortunately had an entrance fee, so I had to pay $35 individually. So in total, it was $70 I had to pay, and that's not including the taxi that we had to get there. The taxi was $12 for each, and and that was $24. So I spent a lot of money going to the beach. I didn't like the beach. The beach was a private beach, and the lady told me if I wanted to go to a local beach, it would be $80 and a further taxi ride. I think it was like $80 for the taxi or something like that. I can't really remember. But it was on the other side of the island, and being on a cruise ship, we don't have time. So, with that being said, so we went to the beach, and I didn't like it because it was rocks and stuff like that. But on our way to the beach, I'm backtracking. On our way to the beach, we took the taxi, and I was talking to the taxi driver in Spanish, and she was like, "Wow, you speak very good Spanish," and stuff like that. And she's like, she was telling me everything about Cozumel in Mexico City. She said she moved from Mexico City to Cozumel for a safer life, so that for her family. I'm like, wow, that's pretty interesting. So the conversations were amazing. Very, very amazing. And they loved that I spoke Spanish. They really loved it. Then on the way back, getting back to the port for the cruise ship, I was talking to the taxi driver again. He's like, where do you learn Spanish? I was like, I have a tutor, I have books, and I watch videos on YouTube all the time. And he was very impressed by that. So the conclusion. So my conclusion is this. If you are learning Spanish, I highly recommend you go to a place that isn't a resort themed, and there's a lot of tourists there. So you're forced to speak Spanish, because when you're forced to speak Spanish, not only do you look more attractive to the locals, because you're American, you're a foreigner, and you're actually speaking Spanish. It's like, wow, like that's really cool. You learn more, and I learned this on watching videos on YouTube, reading books. The way to learn another language is you have to speak it, and you have to mess up. That's how you learn. If you're learning Spanish, you're like, you know what, I want to play the safe route. I want to go on a cruise. I want to go to a resort in Mexico or something like that. You're not going to learn anything. You're not going to practice your Spanish, because everybody in the resort or on a cruise ship or on the tours, they all speak perfect English. So that's my conclusion. You can't really improve your Spanish if you're traveling to a resort, and you can improve it drastically if you're going to a place that's not a resort, like Puerto Plata, Santo Domingo, Santiago, Guadalajara, Ciudad de Mexico, all those Spanish comprehension. I'm going to be talking in Spanish with different people, and I'm going to upload the conversations, so you can improve your comprehension. Okay, adios, bye.